So we can see here I will write fun main println, right? How many numbers will you enter? Of course, because we want to take input from the user, right? So we will use readline dot to int on null, right? Val num0, val I0, and we will use while, right? So let me just walk you through every piece. First of all, we need to know that we ask the user how many numbers they want to enter. We convert that to an integer or default to 0 with the else operator if they enter something invalid. Like see here, var sum equals to 0, which means we start a running total from 0 at 0, right? Then we have var I is equal to 0. This is our counter variable. And what I mean by counter variable is that I is the traditional name for loop counters and it starts at 0. Then comes our while loop. So we have while I is less than amount, right? This is the while loop. So this thing runs its body for code for as long as the condition I is less than amount is true, right? Let me just say it again for you, that this runs its body of code for as long as the condition I less than amount is true. So what if the user enters 3? This loop will run while I is 0, then while I is 1, then while I is 2. When I reaches 3, the condition 3 less than 3 becomes false, and then that's where the loop stops. Inside the loop body, we need to see that we print which number we are asking for. Like say we have please enter number and $i plus 1, so whatever the number user inputs plus 1, right? We do I plus 1 because I starts with 0, but we want to say please enter number 1, right? Not number 0. So we read the user's input and try to convert it to an integer. Then we have if number is equals to null and continue. So the continue keyword here, as you can see, immediately jumps to the next iteration of the loop, skipping everything that comes after in the current iteration, right? So if the user enters a valid number, we skip adding it to the sum and we skip incrementing I. This means that the loop will ask for the same number again. Then we have sum plus equals to number, right? As you can see here, what this means is that add this number to our running total, right? And then I plus plus, it's our increment in our counter, right? This is what moves us toward the end condition. And after the loop ends, it prints the total sum, right? So you can type anything here in this code, type 3 or type 4, right? I will type 3, then enter number 3, right? Just whatever you want, 10, 25, 15, right? So the total sum will be 50, right? So you can notice that how when you enter an invalid number, it asks again for the same number. That is the role of continue keyword, and that is working perfectly. There's also a break keyword which completely exits the loop immediately, not just the current iteration, because we won't build it into this example, but no, it exists for situation where you need to bail out of a loop early, right? That's what while loops are for. I just want you to know that loops are one of the first things that separates I understand syntax from I can actually program, because programming is repetition and automation, right? This is what we are doing here. So the program we just wrote asks the user how many numbers they want to enter and repeatedly asks for numbers, adds them together, prints find total, and the important part is that it repeats automatically. That is what loops do, right, at the end. Now we ask the user for amount at this point, right? Though this is a simple prompt, right? And then we were converting output in the readline dot to int null. This line has a lot of things happening, so let's break it down carefully. Once again, readline, though this what it does is that it reads text entered by user. But remember one thing, that user input is always string. So even if user types 3, Kotlin sees this 3 as a string and not as an int. So that's why we have two int or null. What this tries is that it tries converting string into an int safety, into an integer safely. But what if we type hello here, right? So it cannot become an int. So whenever you will type an actual string, the result will always come as null instead of crashing. That is very important, right? So the running total, this we have var sum equals to 0, right? This variable stores total sum at beginning, sum equals to 0. As numbers gets added, 0, 10, 50, 35, 50, it keeps updating. This is what we call running total, and it is very common programming pattern. Then we have the loop counter, right? This is where I is equals to 0. This is our counter variable, traditionally named I for index or iteration. Its job is tracking basically, because it will ask that how many times has loop run. This is the role of I. And meanwhile the while loop, now the important part, that while I is less than amount, right? So this means that keep looping as long as this condition is true. So I will loop until and unless the I is not as equal to the amount, right? This is critical because while loops depend entirely on conditions. So here's an example. Suppose user entered 3, then amount is equal to 3, loop condition becomes while I is less than 3. So it will continue I1, I2 and I3, right? It will stop at 0, 1, 2, right? And when it reaches I is 3, right? So 3 cannot be less than 3. So the condition will automatically become false. Then here we have the increment I++. So now I is equal to 1. Then check again, 1 is less than 3. So it is still true. So loop will run again. Then 1 is less than 3, still true, loops run again. Then I is equal to 2, 2 is less than 3, still runs, right? And then I is equal to true. So it will become false and loop will stop. But the program continues. The important thing is that loops only stop when condition become false. If condition never becomes false, it will be an infinite loop, and it is a very dangerous beginner mistake. Inside the loop, let's just examine the loop body. So here we were asking for a number. Why? Because instead of just I, because counters start at 0 but humans count starting at 1. So without +1, right, please enter number 0, it looks weird. So we shift display value. That's when taking output read input safety convert to null, right? Then here comes the continue evert. Now this line is very important. So continue means that skip rest of the current iteration and jump to next loop cycle immediately. This is a huge gap, right? This is basically completely huge. And also a thumb of rule that while loops are the best when you don't know the exact number of iteration beforehand. Just a few examples: that waiting for user input, game loop, reading file, listening to server, returning API call. These are very common in real softwares, right? And if I have to say something honestly, that it accumulates value over time, and loops are where programming starts feeling powerful. Because now your code isn't just executing once anymore. Now it can repeat, automate, process data, react to users, handle dynamic situation, and that is the foundation of every real application you will ever build in your life, in Android development basically, right? So we learned about the while loop, and the while loop is powerful because it keeps running as long as some condition is true, right? But there's another type of loop that's more appropriate when you know exactly what you are iterating over: the for loop. This is the for loop we are talking about, right? And honestly, for loops are usually cleaner, safer, and easier to read when you already know what you are iterating it over, especially when you are working with ranges, arrays, lists, strings, and collections. So today we are breaking down how for loops work, ranges, inclusive versus exclusive ranges, iterating over strings, reversing strings, down to last index, build string, and how Kotlin simplifies looping, right? So let's get into it. Now this program is very similar for the while loop version, but the structure is cleaner, right? Let me just break it down for you, because this does the same thing as the while loop version, but notice what's the difference. So we have one here, and we will have this. Alright, so for I in one amount, as I will write, the for loop, what it does here is that the for loop iterates over a range, right? And one amount, as we can see here, creates a range from 1 to the amount. It is inclusive, mean if amount is 3, the range is 1 to 3. The variable I takes each value in that one by one. There's no I plus plus anymore increment, because the for loop handles that automatically, right? Isn't that easier? So there's no I is less than amount condition to write, because the for loop builds all of that in. So 1 to the amount is an inclusive range. It includes both the start 1 and the end, which is amount. So if you want an exclusive range that doesn't include the last number, use until semicolon and 1 until amount, right? So it goes from 1 up to, but not including the amount, right? Now here's where the for loops really shine, iterating over collections. Let me show you iterating over a string character by character. Here we can see here char in output, we are iterating over the string input. A string is just an array of character under the hood, right? So you can iterate over it directly. In each iteration, char holds one character from the string from left to right. Exactly, right? So now let me show you something more interesting. Let's reverse a string using a for loop and a special Kotlin function called build string. So here we can see that build string curly braces, and yes, this is our code. This is a special Kotlin function for constructing strings piece by piece, right? So inside the block you can call append function, right? It is also a built-in function in Kotlin. So we use append to add characters or text to the string being built. When the block is done, build string returns the complete string. Then we have the input.lastIndex. What it means here is every string has a last index property. It's the index of the last character. If the string is hello, right? So last index is 4. Because indices are 0 to 4, right? So that's why last index is 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, as you can see here. Then we have down to 0, because instead of counting up like 1 to 5, we are counting down. So input.lastIndex down to 0 here means that it will start from the last index and goes down to 0. So for hello we can iterate 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, right? Because hello has 5 chars, so 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 here, right? Then we have the append input I. What it does here is that in each iteration we grab the character at index I and append it to our string being built. Since we are going from last to first, we build the string backward, as we can see here. Now I want you to know that why for loops are so powerful and why developers love this. So for loop became foundation for arrays, lists, recycler views, APIs, algorithm, text processing, gaming logic, and data handling. So almost everything in software development depends on iteration or for loop or iteration, right? And honestly, understanding loops properly is one of the biggest milestones in programming world, because now your code can process collections, manipulate text, automate repetitive tasks, and work dynamically with data. And that's when coding stops feeling like writing static instructions and starts feeling like building actual software. That's where you start gaining interest in coding. and of course we have to take input from the user. That's why we use readline dot int or null, right? We can do anything with null, so we will check in a different video, right? So this is for while loop and for loop differences, but that's the loop which is more appropriate when you know exactly what you are iterating over at the end.